The following is meant for entertainment and educational purposes. It is not meant to establish a doctor-patient relationship. Please consult your mental health provider for your mental health needs. Hello, welcome to Chez Eric, where we talk about psychiatry and religion with a focus on how to apply it to your life. My name is Dr. Eric, and I am a psychiatrist who happens to be religious, and I really like talking about psychiatry and religious stuff. And this particular episode is going to be about the final thoughts on the William James series. I don't know if you personally have watched it all the way from introduction to to the postscript, but lectures 1 through 20. But if you have, it's really great, and I really hope that I can reward you with this final thoughts on the William James series. And if you haven't watched it, well, I guess you're in luck, because I'm going to do a little mini summary of the entire lectures 1 through 20, and possibly the introduction and the postscript as well. I'll bring it all together because I want to share a really, really interesting concept of how William James, his work interacts with the things we discussed in the previous lecture series, or the deep dive into Sigmund Freud's The Future of an Illusion. So we're doing this in sort of a long form format. There are going to be a couple of cuts, fancy editing, and I hope you enjoy it. So let's get into a summary of the entire William James series. And if you don't mind, I'm going to need to look at my notes during this time because it's kind of complicated, because I did, do 20 series and it was like a bajillion videos, but I hope that I can do a quick recap of everything we've learned so far. So for lecture 1 of the William James series, it was titled Religion and Neurology. And that's where we were looking at religious feelings, not institutions. That was the focus of our explanation of the religious experience. And then we kind of had an idea of religious tendencies versus religious significance. So the tendencies could be things in nature and the origin of religion and the history of religion. We're not as concerned about that. What we're really concerned about is the religious significance, the value of religion. And that we also established in lecture 1 that we need to focus on religious genius as the main material for understanding the religious experience. Lecture number 2, it's titled Circumscription of the Topic. And this is where William James kind of wants to carve out exactly what we're trying to talk about. So here he wants to talk about private religious experiences. He doesn't really want to talk about the institutional religions. He wants to talk, again, let's focus on private individuals' experiences of people who are really, really, really special. And for lecture number 3, we talked about the reality of the unseen. That's what it's titled. We talk about consciousness and our senses and our perceptions, but that there seems to be something more than just these things, just the senses that we have, just the consciousness that we have. And William James points out that there's this quasi-reality related to experience, and when we have this quasi-reality, we have a tendency to rationalize and make arguments after the fact about it. So go back to that lecture if it's a little bit a lot. Lectures 4 and 5 were bunched together. And this is where William James goes into this concept called healthy mindedness. And healthy mindedness is a branch of a belief of religion where people are untroubled by the existence of evil. They're just happy, they have a positive outlook, they're just happy generally speaking. So that's healthy mindedness. For lecture number 8, in contrast, he talks about the sick soul. And this is the sick soul where they can't let go of the problem of evil and they have a conflict within themselves. And it's only through understanding future parts of bringing things together can they really get things solved, which goes into lecture number 8, the divided self and the process of its unification, where the sick soul again can't let go of evil and it has a conflict within itself. So therefore, to achieve sort of an inner unity, it goes through the religious conversion, a conversion to religiosity, to have this unity between this evil that they can't ignore and this conflict within themselves. Then lecture number 9, we talked about conversion, and he talks about the different types of conversion, and that there are 2 types: a gradual conversion, where you slowly sort of learn more about a divine entity and you begin to believe, and then there's a sudden conversion, and he talks about the difference between the volitional type, which is the gradual type, and then self-surrender, which is the sudden one. And he kind of talks a little bit about the relatedness of the subconscious to the conversion process. That goes into lecture number 10, which is Conversion Concluded, where he discusses and goes deeper into the dramatic and sudden forms of conversion. And he relates it to the subconscious, that he believes that there are subconscious processes that gets people to understand, like to convert to religiosity. And then lectures 11, 12, and 13, he talks about saintliness, and he talks about the different fruits of saintliness, namely asceticism, strength of soul, purity, and charity. And he, talks about that they exist. And then in lectures, let's see, these are Roman numerals. So lectures 14 and 15, he talks about the value of saintliness, and he talks about, they must be judged on practical matters of common sense. Like, do we really value, strength of soul, asceticism? Do we value these things? And that some fruits of saintliness can become very extreme, very excessive, and have very bad results. So he points out that, we need to be careful about when we're pursuing this idea of saintliness, that it's not all it's cracked up to be, and we really need to kind of be practical about the fruits of saintliness, saintliness being what happens when you are very, 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 very religious. And then lectures 16 and 17, we talk about mysticism, because mysticism is something, the religious experience, but has a very specific set of criteria, namely ineffability, noetic quality, meaning knowledge, transiency, meaning can't last forever, and passivity, meaning that you're not the one running the show, some other entity is. So mysticism is really, really, really big deal because that is the core of the religious experience, and often experienced by people who are weak would consider saints. And then he talks about philosophy. That's lecture, did I lose track? I think it's lecture 18, right? And this is where he talks about the role of philosophy in understanding religion. And he contrasts this with the religious experience, where the religious experience is individual and an individual experience as it relates to a divine being. Philosophy tries to be universal. And in being universal, it loses a lot of qualities. However, we don't want to throw out philosophy entirely. Philosophy can't help us understand the religious experience. However, philosophy can help us sort out ideas and concepts to clarify our discussions of our religious experiences. Finally, he goes through chapter 19 called Other Characteristics, where he just couldn't really fit in other characteristics of the religious experience. So he talks about aesthetics, sacrifice, confession, prayer, and a little bit about poverty, kind of weaved into all of that. And then finally, in his conclusions, he talks about, the common nucleus of all religions is there is an uneasiness, that there's something wrong about the world, and that there's a solution, that we are saved from this uneasiness by making a connection with a higher power. And then this is where he discusses the science of religions, or a better way to understand religion that takes into account all of these factors of the individuality versus the institutions, about mysticism, and about how we can approach it in a way that is truly respectful of the qualities of experience as opposed to a scientific endeavor. And finally, with the proscript, William James talks about the difference between a refined versus a crasser form of supernaturalism, and he identifies himself with the crasser form of supernaturalism. But then when he talks about, when it comes to ultimate concerns about life and death, right, and God interacting with our lives, he says we should take a more pluralistic approach because we are so uncertain, because it is based on your own personal experience, because we're really trying to go for truth, right? And he kind of doesn't want us to have a false sense of certainty leading our understanding of religion. All right. So that is, in a nutshell, William James's Varieties of Religious Experience. You're probably wondering, why didn't I just do this, section now? Why did I have to go through all of that? Well, I mean, it is what it is. So I'd like to talk about the implications now. So now we got the summary of the William James series out of the way. We can now talk about its relationship with Freud, when I was talking before about the future of an illusion. And if you want to go back, you can pause it and go back to the future of an illusion, final thoughts, where I summarize it and talk about my final thoughts, just to refresh your mind. but I can kind of do a mini summary here. You see, with Freud, in The Future of an Illusion, his claim was that religion was really just a way for us to manage our anxiety. And we took the management of our anxiety from, I guess, our childhood, the way our parents helped us manage our anxiety. And when our parents managed our anxiety in a particular way, God then took that form of a father figure. And that was his sort of thing. And he says, we don't need religion, we just need science, because science will bring us to where we need to be. What's very interesting is that William James also goes for the science of religion, and how does this all come into play? So, what's interesting is that both William James and Freud seem to be going after this concept of we need to bring a scientific method to our understanding of religion, our understanding of the divine, our understanding of God. And for Freud, he believed that when we go through this science-y stuff, we'll find that there really isn't anything special about God. We'll get rid of God, we won't need him. William James, on the other hand, says we need to have a scientific approach we have that scientific approach to understanding religion, sort of, when he talks about the science of religion. But he points out that, when we're talking about science and philosophy as a universal concept, it will never understand religion, and that it is the religious experience that matters. And although Freud might say that these religious experiences are individual and anecdotal and they don't really add up to a whole amount of beans or whatever, William James would say, no, it is the most important thing because it is your experience and it changes your life and brings fruits to your life. And in that dynamic of, religion bringing fruits to your life, that is what we can use to judge whether or not religion is helpful and is useful to us. And we use religion. We don't just believe it and then it hurts us. We keep the religions that make us better, that makes us more loving and more kind and helps us as a society. And then you might deny it all you want, but history says otherwise. So that's ultimately these two conflicting sort of paradigms that's kind of coming together. And what's interesting is that psychiatry and religion split after Freud made his big sort of claim that religion is dumb. But it didn't come back together when William James came into play, because he's doing his thing, but he truly talks about this idea of the subconscious interacting with our religiosity and that they're intertwined together. So then how does this help you? How does this fit into our current world? So give me 1 second about that. Ooh, fancy editing. I'm getting used to this. So how does this all fit? How does the Freud series fit with the William James series with our understanding of psychiatry and religion, and how does it help you? Well, we need to recognize that there's actually a trend nowadays where people are no longer affiliating with religious institutions, and instead they're going into this general idea of spirituality. And this is a trend, I think there was a Pew Research Center thing about this, and what's going on with this trend? I mean, are religions falling apart? Is there more negative religion? Is the devil involved, telling, religion and taking them down and everything? And of course, there are scandals upon scandals upon scandals we hear about religious institutions overall, kind of creating a distaste. But there still seems to be this general desire to have a connection with a higher power, a spirituality, a more individualistic version of spirituality. So what's going on? Well, I believe that this is actually more a part of the transition from collectivism to individualism in our modern society. And what do I mean by that? Back in the day, maybe 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, people really, really needed to work together or else they would literally die. They really had no ability to kind of kill the elephant on their own, or lion on their own, or grow the things on their own, like the big gigantic agriculture and stuff like that. So we found that when we worked together, then we would be able to survive and have a higher chance of surviving. And this created simple societies, I guess agrarian societies or hunter-gatherer societies. I didn't really remember my anthropology class back in undergrad, but I think I'm generally correct. And then it advanced to our current modern day, right? So we have a modern day society where we are, it's pretty complex. We have retirements, right? We have 401ks. We have giant boats shipping gigantic materials over here and there. We have gigantic factories compared to, of course, with our earlier days. Like, how would you do that, right? So back then, it seemed like religion was the center of the economies of the society, where people got together, at least on a weekly basis, to talk about things, to worship, and to treat each other nicely overall. And religion served that purpose. However, nowadays, we are able to not worry about this interconnectedness. We don't have to be a collective anymore to survive. We can actually be an individual on our own. For example, if you were a farmer and you didn't produce kids, then you died, because when you retired, you wouldn't be able to farm. You needed a bunch of kids to be able to do the work. And that's why fertility was such a big deal. Nowadays, you don't have to be a farmer. You don't have to actually hunt for your food. You can buy it in the supermarket. You can work on a random job and collect enough money and save enough money, save enough value to then retire for the rest of your life and never have to worry about that at all. You can actually put yourself in a personal bubble. And in that personal bubble, you don't need anyone else, and you just focus on yourself. So this has great implications for self-actualization and meaning and greater sense of meaning. But this is really bad when it comes to everybody's individual tiny bubbles of what they're creating for themselves. And we see that in social media these days. We see people just getting, information for themselves, and they're filtering out the things that could actually help, improve their worldview or diversify their worldview. And so what we have is this interesting concept about the religious experience as an answer to Freud's sort of criticism that religion is just used for anxiety. No, religion is not just used to alleviate your anxiety for collectivism purposes to come together and not deal with the nature and destruction and everything. Religion, according to William James as an answer to Freud, is the answer. It's sort of the experience to give you meaning and life, right? To interact so that it helps benefit your life in a very positive way. And we can't just get rid of it, and we can't analyze it with science because it's very personal. And now we're in that place right now where we can be individualistic. But then what is the shape of religion when everyone wants to pursue an individualistic sort of ideal? And individualistic sort of understanding of God. And on the most, idealistic version of that would be everyone is very philosophical and open-minded. But how it's actually playing out is that everyone just kind of carves a corner of their life and they ignore other people's views, and that's their worldview. And why is that the case? This is the reason why it's working that way is because of ego. People have egos. They have a sense of themselves that they're trying to protect. And when we're talking about doing the correct religion, your ego, your sense of yourself, is going to be based on having the correct religion. But if, let's say, a random religion was given to you at birth and you kept it and you invested into it, it becomes more and more difficult for you to consider the possibility that other religions could be better, right? Or could be sort of more correct, or could be enriching. And then we get into other problems along that way because your personal biases exist, and it's hard to believe or hard to understand like how that could possibly be the guaranteed sort of correct way of viewing things. But this then becomes the enlightened view, which looks down on the unenlightened view, and you get a fight, and then everybody argues, but they're all arguing on this universal standpoint, when in actuality, it's really an individual experience that we need to sort of center on. So without understanding your personal psychiatry or your psychology, it's very hard to have a good foundation for building upon those experiences so you actually can benefit your life, right? And so now I'm going to talk about the next phase of the role of science as with respect to religion. All right, I hope you're enjoying these edits. I don't normally edit, but I'm doing this editing thing now because it's easier for me to put these concepts all together. So what is the role of science with respect to religion? Scientific advances, have solved many mysteries in the world, many mysteries that religion used to have an explanation for. Like, why does it rain? Why are thunderclouds happening all the time? Why do hurricanes hit my home and everything? Science has come to explain a lot, but as a result, people have accused religion of just not being real, being fake, because religion used to explain things and now science can explain it, so can science potentially explain everything? That is the eternal debate between the atheists and the theists. The atheists saying that science can explain everything, theists saying not everything because science is an amoral concept. So that means science doesn't tell us why we should do things. It tells us, like what happens and how it happens, but it doesn't give us the purpose. Science is not meant to give us purpose and meaning. It is meant to simply explain the world as it is. So William James makes a proposal of the relationship between science and religion, and science/philosophy. He, of course, this is probably beating a dead horse, but religion is a personal experience. And it is derived from the personal experience of very, very awesome, extreme people who have had very strong mystical experiences. And we've analyzed them through the William James series to talk about these mystical experiences and analyze them, and we saw all these characteristics. But all of religion derives from these mystical experiences and these people that are really, really, really awesome. However, science and philosophy is a universal concept. It seeks to seek universal truths. But you can't really derive universal truths from individual experiences. So what do we do? Now, William James says we should have an understanding of these experiences and then see the fruits of these experiences. So to kind of summarize, I suppose, the way I envision religion and science coming together is that imagine a space where you have a big hat, where everybody puts their religious experiences in this hat. And we all compare and contrast each other's religious experiences, recognizing that your individual religious experience is personal to you and it's valid for you, but that there might be value in understanding other people's religious experience and commonalities in them, so we can kind of just understand, okay, what is on the fringes, what is real, what is not. So here's a good example. Let's say someone has feeling very, very down. And then suddenly some random occurrence happens and that makes them feel like God is in their life and God is trying to send them a message. This is a fairly, vague description, but it's a common description as well. A lot of people have said that some random event happens and there's a series of random events that happens that has to make them believe, that leads them to believe that God exists. We can express these experiences with other people who also believe in God. And then we can compare and contrast what it looks like. And in comparing and contrasting, we can then begin to have a better idea of the religious experience as a series of experiences. And when we bring our understanding of psychology and psychiatry, which is just an addition of our understanding of our biology, we can begin to understand what parts of this experience may have certain biases there, and what parts of this experience is actually truly divine, and we can understand sort of the conflict between our own personal desires versus what we get an inkling from somebody else, and then have sort of a discussion where we're trying to delve deeper into the core of our experiences, but we're not necessarily trying to sift out a universal truth for all people to understand. Because we found time and time again in history that these universal truths always end up changing and shifting and not necessarily being universal truths. So maybe it really is better about focusing on the individual experiences and comparing and contrasting them and creating a network of comparing and contrasting experiences as the religious pursuit. So it's possible that that's the direction we can go from the collectivist model to the individual model. So why am I doing all of this? Why am I putting all this extra work to create a new paradigm? Why can't we just go with whatever we're currently doing? The problem that I'm finding that I'm devoting, my life or this portion of my time to express is that religion right now is rooted in this concept of certainty, right? However, our limited perspectives, by virtue of being a human being, makes it so that uncertainty and ambiguity is the only thing we really have. religion has changed over the years, and it's done so for all ages. But nowadays, we still have dogma, and the dogma, the certainty that we have, that's based on a series of rules, right, that exist, that is the foundation which a lot of religious groups, rest on, and then they lose the individual in the process. They lose the individual interaction with others. And in losing that, I believe they lose the religious experience that makes the connection with a higher being so much more meaningful. Because if your life is just a series of facts or a series of rules, then that is almost living, I would say, inauthentically, because you're not interacting with reality, you're just interacting with the rule. And I believe that if we have a different paradigm, the paradigm I just talked about before, about we focus on experience, we can have a more robust and enriching journey towards religion or understanding a higher being. Because I don't believe a higher being can be confined to a series of rules that we've distilled, right? Or a series of limited language that we're using. I believe that there's always this constant evolution, and the evolution is okay so long as we embrace the evolution as part of the process. So what does this mean for the future of religion, right? I don't believe that right now religious institutions have the dogma, and that's what differentiates them from each other. One group believes like baptism is one way, another group believes baptism another way, and that's their rule, and that's it. And they make their arguments with each other, but they are set in their ways. And is there an ultimate truth about it? Well, each individual group is going to have an ultimate truth about it, but they're not going to agree they're going to agree to disagree, but they can't seem to come to an agreement. And when we divide each other on dogmatic lines, it seems like that's not exactly very healthy in the long run. But when we focus on sharing experiences, that is a more robust way as we enter into an age where we have greater technological advances to understand the reality more and sciences more, and the transition from collectivism to individualism. Because if we don't do that, then what we're going to have is a bunch of individual people want to do their own individual thing, and religion and a higher power just becomes a reflection of their own personal egos. And unless they can look at it humbly, it's not going to get them very far, and we'll have a lot of individual beliefs, and then we'll have this pluralistic society, this pluralistic belief system, and interacting with each other, and it's not going to be unified, and it's going to cause more conflict because of, and not just conflict, extreme conflict, because it deals with something so personal, it deals with your sense of salvation, okay? So we've all got to be on the same wavelength here, that this is about experiences, it's about our personal experiences with God, and that the institution should focus on us expressing these experiences and understanding commonalities, not for the purposes of creating dogma, but for the purposes of understanding more. And that, to me, to you, is me expressing my final thoughts about the William James series as it interacts with Freud's The Future of an Illusion. And I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found this entire lecture series interesting. I hope that this video, if you watched everything all the way through, was very well worth all the work that you put into it. So congratulate yourself if you watched everything. If you haven't, that's okay. I don't mind. I am Dr. Eric. I'm a psychiatrist who happens to be religious. This is Chez Eric, Psychiatry, Religion, and Life, where we talk about psychiatry and religion on how to benefit your life. And I'll talk to you next time. Hey, sign up for my weekly newsletter. I send out emails every week on psychiatry and religion. I realize that email is a great way to go deep into these topics. So if you want more content, check out ChezEricPurl.com and subscribe over there. Thanks.